Some games just don't quite live up to the hype. We've made many lists about games that were overhyped, but today we want to look at games that specifically had a lot of promise and just ended up under-delivering. Games that didn't necessarily all end up bad, but just didn't quite reach the heights that we were expecting, or maybe even the creators of the games were expecting. We got 10 games to talk about, so let's get started off with number 10. Of course, I have to bring up the Fable series. This is painful for me because, to be honest, I absolutely love the original Fable games. But if you're new around the gaming news world, for years, Fable had a reputation of being the most talked up, ambitious game that just didn't meet those lofty goals. Lionhead Studios was famous for talking a big game and never quite meeting those big ambitions. And with Fable, you can look at a lot of the things promised throughout the series that never ended up in the games. Specifically Fable 3, you were supposed to be way more of a king and not just making decisions towards the later half of the game.
You have the power over life and death, brother. Now choose.
This is not the time for revenge.
But really, it was that original Fable that kicked it off. The years leading up to Fable, this game was talked up to be like the second coming. It was supposed to be the game to end all games. It was going to be incredibly ambitious, and you would follow this entire hero's life and customize every inch of them and live out your real life in this digital fantasy world. The greatest example of the game just having absurd promises that it never met was the concept that you could plant a seed in the game and a tree would grow over time because of the simulation of the game world and time passing. Of course, nothing like that ever came to fruition, but personally, I am grateful that Fable still turned out to be absolutely awesome. It could have been even cooler with all these crazy ideas that were tossed around, but if we're talking about games that promise too much and kind of technically under-delivered, Fable does make the list. Still, I'll say if you never played the original Fable, play it. You can get it on Steam. It's awesome.
Brace yourself for that.
Now next over at number 9, I guess we're sticking with something that's kind of Xbox, and it's Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite, we actually went on record recently saying that the game has been improved recently. But unfortunately, it seems like too little too late. Halo Infinite has a player base. It fluctuated for sure around launch, but ultimately, it was the promise of the game being titled Halo Infinite, the Halo that would just keep you playing forever. Unfortunately, that just didn't really work out, and it feels like Halo Infinite has lost steam, both like in the world, people playing the game, but also in the gaming culture. You just don't hear people too hyped up about it these days. So Halo Infinite didn't really live up to the name Infinite. It didn't fulfill the promise of it being kind of a return to form for Halo with the campaign, yes, but also a strong, solid multiplayer foundation that would carry it for years. The core gameplay is awesome, it's great, but for some reason, 343 I guess just never really stuck the landing with this one. I bounced out a while back, there's all different reasons to really go into this, but ultimately, Halo isn't the massive sensation that it could be. Halo really could have competed with like the big heavyweights, like Fortnite. Halo Infinite could have been the one, but it just wasn't quite there.
Spartan's not so tough, I think. Break open easy. Soft inside?
Chief? I see him.
Next over at number 8, we have Star Wars Battlefront. The new Star Wars Battlefront game published by EA years back was incredibly exciting leading up to launch. The people behind the Battlefield games were working on it. This could be absolutely awesome. Everybody was really excited for the return of Battlefront. It had been so many years, and some of us have so many fond memories of those original 2 Battlefront games. So this, with great developers behind it, really awesome graphics, it had the potential to be so great. And unfortunately, when it released, it was really just an unfinished package. There just wasn't enough to it. Not enough maps, not enough modes, no campaign. It just felt like a very simple, basic product you could play a little bit. Like, it looked absolutely gorgeous, yes, but maybe they spent a lot of time on the graphics and not on game modes and content. You know, of course, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is the one in history that totally screwed things up with all the microtransaction stuff, but ultimately, that game ended up swinging things around and providing a ton of stuff to play.
Securing command command post desk. Attack the objective! Our forces have secured command post desk.
But the original new Star Wars Battlefront released, and it just felt overpriced, undercooked, and a lot of us were kind of disappointed. It wasn't necessarily a bad game by any means, but there just wasn't enough meat on the bone. You know what I mean? Next down at number 7, we have Too Human. This is Silicon Knights' essentially last game. This was a big game for them. This development studio had been working on this game for many, many years. I think like a decade. There was originally a development deal for PlayStation, then it flip-flopped to GameCube, then eventually when the game finally released, it ended up on Xbox. And there was just a lot of hype behind this one if you followed gaming news because it had gotten so many deals. You know, the fact that Nintendo wanted a piece of the action, PlayStation wanted a piece of the action. Too Human really could have been the next big thing. People were thinking it was going to be a franchise. They really seemed like they had intentions of making it a franchise. The idea sounded cool on paper. It was like Norse mythology sci-fi. So you're playing as like a cool cybernetic superhuman Baldur going around slaying enemies. Then unfortunately, when it finally released after years of development hell, it just wasn't great. It wasn't bad by any means. I mean, some people panned it in reviews, but it was just kind of okay. You played it, you had a good time, that was really it. It wasn't necessarily the next big thing or a game worth so many years of development and restarted developments and then eventual lawsuits involving Epic and a bunch of stuff that ended up with Silicon Knights closing their doors. The people behind the original Blood Omen, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, the Twin Snakes, X-Men Destiny, with X-Men Destiny being their last thing, technically. But yeah, that was it for Silicon Knights. I wonder what it would be like if we still had them today.
Make those shots count.
Anyway, next over at number 6, we have Starfield. Now, this is a controversial one. It's a newer game. People are still forming their opinions on it, but we'll be totally transparent here. I did the before you buy for Starfield, and I said I liked it, I just don't love it. I don't think it really quite reached the heights of some of Bethesda Studios' best games, but there was still some fun to be had there. But where the game really promised too much and underdelivered was with some of the space stuff. Planetary exploration at launch just wasn't very exciting. The idea for this game, what was pitched to us, was building a spaceship, flying out in that spaceship, and exploring planets in a Bethesda-style gameplay system. But those planets were boring, repetitious, bland, and filled with not much. A lot of that stuff, those aspects, were undercooked. That's where we think Starfield underdelivered. I mean, there's a lot to enjoy about Starfield, and people certainly are, whether it's the combat, the questing, some of the characters and the charm, or the world building. Starfield is cool. But we never really got the sense of space exploration like we were quite hoping. Next over at number 5, we have Advent Rising. I talked about this recently in another video, but I thought it was worth really visiting because a lot of people forgot about this one. But this 2005 game was published by Majesco and released on PC and the original Xbox. And this was a kind of third-person action sci-fi adventure. You were third-person running and gunning, shooting aliens on alien planets. You were hopping in vehicles and driving them around. It kind of felt a little bit like third-person Halo with an emphasis on sci-fi storytelling and world building. Famous sci-fi writer Orson Scott Card helped come up with the story. Tommy Tallarico did the music. There was a spin-off comic book series and everything, and the idea was this thing was going to be the next big franchise. It was a planned trilogy, but ultimately Advent Rising released, it was pretty cool, and that was it. So where this game really underdelivered was the promise of it being something cool that we'd all invest in, like a cool world, a bunch of games and sequels. There was a planned PSP spinoff as well called Advent Shadow that was in the works. That was canceled because the game released and the reception wasn't bad. It was kind of average, but it just really didn't hook audiences, general audiences. I really would have been curious to see where this series would have went. I was pretty excited for it, to be honest. But unfortunately, Advent Rising never delivered those big sequels and this big tentpole franchise. Now down at number 4, we have Battlefield 2042. Now, in recent months, they've really turned this game around. It has improved, it has given things that players wanted, but at launch, man, this game was an absolute mess. The promise, which is the point of this video, the promise was that Battlefield 2042 was the one for the fans. There was no campaign, no fluff, no nonsense. It was all multiplayer, built around creating those big, exciting, organic moments that you'd see go viral in Battlefield games. This game was going to offer tons of massive maps, all different types of weapons, the options to play different weird modes, even kind of engage in different levels of warfare, like World War II in certain playlists. There was so much like weight of stuff and hype behind Battlefield 2042 for it to just be like the multiplayer gamer's game. And then when it released, it was a mess. First of all, it was based around like a character operator system that people really didn't like. It just was not compelling, and it wasn't Battlefield. The game also just was a glitchy, awful mess. Hits weren't registering, vehicles were clipping through the map, the game was completely undercooked and unfinished, and it was really painful to see, and they were charging full price for this thing. It had a lot of ideas there, but in terms of quality, it really underdelivered. I mean, at launch, the game didn't even have like the famous, like overly detailed Battlefield scoreboards. That's something that players actually really love, and we were like immediately like, wait, where is all this stuff? Like Halo Infinite, Battlefield 2042 could have been the Battlefield that we played for like 10 years. I don't know if that's going to happen. Like I said, they've kind of turned it around, but I don't know if the damage is really done or not yet at this point. Now down at number 3, Star Citizen. Now I know, I'll stop you here, I know there are some Star Citizen fans that watch these videos. We hear you. People that are invested or just playing Star Citizen or in the community, they're in it for the long haul, they love it, and we will not yuck your yum there. You do you. But it still isn't technically fully released. So we're counting it as a game that has promised a lot, but hasn't actually delivered that full final game yet. It seems like fans are happy with the level of transparency they're getting. This game has been in the works forever. But as outsiders, like people who took an interest in the game, that seems cool. We'll play it eventually when it releases. Well, we're still waiting. I know the game and like the spin-off and everything are more playable than they've ever been, but like it's still never really got that full launch. Is that even part of the plan anymore? I don't know for sure, but Star Citizen is just a really interesting thing. It's an anomaly in the gaming industry. Now down at number 2, we have Brink. Oh man, do you remember Brink? This released in 2011 for PC, PS3, and Xbox 360. It was published by Bethesda, but it was made by Splash Damage. And this, for a lot of us, was going to be like the next cool multiplayer experience. It was incredibly ambitious, right? It was gonna have like single player elements, co-op elements, multiplayer elements, all these hybrid gameplay systems all crammed into a cool first person game that was really gonna feel different. When it released, it got kind of mixed to average reviews. Some reviews were pretty harsh, but some people really liked it. So it was kind of all over the place, but I guess it never really completely grabbed audiences. There was a lot of cool elements to it. The parkour system in it was so awesome, but that initial trailer, the reveal of Brink, the game ultimately never really felt quite like that. And it didn't really end up taking off and becoming the next cool, unique multiplayer thing. I kind of feel like it came and went in the blink of an eye, and that was unfortunate. Now down at number 1, we have Forspoken. Now, I know, Forspoken has been donked on enough. The game got a lot of bad reviews, people memeing the dialogue, and just some of the quality of the game, just how unremarkable it ended up being. Look, we're not here to revisit that conversation, but we do want to look back at when the game was first revealed. This was a game that promised something really cool, and it didn't deliver that. This game was originally revealed as a work in progress thing called Project Athia, or Project Athia, whatever. It was a new thing from the people behind Final Fantasy 15. It had a bunch of famous game developers and writers behind the initial concept, and it was before the release of PS5, and this thing was billed as like, this is what the games are gonna be like. This is next generation. This is gonna have ray tracing, all that crazy stuff. And to be honest, that initial video of Project Athia, yeah, it looked absolutely awesome. It did look like the next thing. It looked like a generational leap. It was so cool. You see the character moving around at super high speeds in these absolutely gorgeous environments, just graphically incredible, but unfortunately, that was not representative of the final game. They must have really had that just as like a very, very early product demonstration, like a rough concept, because the final version, which is called Forspoken, is nothing really like that. Nowhere near as cool. They did not deliver on this very simple simple but awesome concept. Instead, we got a game that was just kind of like, mid is what they say now, right? That's like what we use. It had some moments, the movement was cool, some of the magic systems were cool, but the story, the world was just forced. It didn't feel compelling. According to Square Enix themselves, the sales of the game were lackluster and we're probably never gonna see a sequel. But hey, that video was a bummer. Those are 10 games that just promised too much and didn't deliver. Obviously, this is a complicated one, and some of you may agree or disagree with some of our choices, and that's the point of this. We're having a conversation. So let us know in the comments what you think. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you like just talking games with us every day, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe, hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.